2024. It is so amazing to be here in front of this crowd, to see so many people here to build wealth. Clap yourselves. And especially so many women. Give it up for the women. Any moms in the house? Any busy moms in the house? I see some hands going up. Does anybody in this room ever struggle with work-life balance? I see some hands going up as well. So we're going to get into that because we have to have a discussion. We have to have a conversation about how we are going to manage that. And throughout this presentation, I'll be sharing some images on the screens, some really interesting photos. So you can take a glance over there on the screens on either side, because I think you might be, well, you'll see. Starting with the very first picture, because I come here today with a confession. I have to be quiet to hear this confession, because confession is good for the soul, they say. I took my laptop to the hospital when I was giving birth to my son. I took my laptop to the hospital when I was giving birth to my son. Now hear me out, I'm not just some crazy workaholic lady, although I'm a bit of that, but not only that, I need to give you some context. So let's start by taking a step back to the year 2019. 5 years ago already, can you imagine? 2019 was already 5 years ago. And I had been doing a little show called Money Mondays JA on Instagram. Short show, 2 to 3 minutes. I call it a show because, that's the industry that I'm in. And it had been gaining rapid popularity on social media. All of a sudden, I was having all of these new followers and people who were interested, just like you, in building wealth. And all of this was happening because the year before, 2018, Jamaica had the #1 performing stock exchange in the entire world. So we weren't just making good money for Jamaica, we weren't just making good money for the Caribbean, we were making good money regardless of where you are in the world. We were giving you the best returns, 200%, 300%. You had one stock barista giving 1,000% return in a single year. And so all of a sudden, there are all these people who want to know what the stock market is and how can I get a piece of that money. And here I come with my experience as a financial journalist, the top financial journalist at the time, okay? Put some respect on my name, hey? Giving you this information on the platform that most of you are. How many people use Instagram in here? Raise your hand if you use Instagram. Most people using Instagram, most people getting their news from social media these days, even more so than from the traditional forms. So Money Mondays JA was born, and this was like a 2 to 3 minute segment on Instagram, telling people about the stock market, telling people how they can start investing, telling people, what the latest stock market news is. But I wanted something bigger for myself. I had a much grander idea, much grander ambition. I wanted to start interviewing the CEOs of all the major listed companies in Jamaica because I wanted more information. I was one of the new investors too. So I was asking for myself. I wanted to know why your company was doing well or why your company was doing poorly. And I wanted to get answers. And I wanted to know, what is your growth plan for this company? And if you're doing an IPO, why should I invest in this IPO? So Money Mondays wasn't enough. I had the idea for taking stock with Kalilah Reynolds. And I'm like, yeah, this show is gonna be it. It's gonna be huge. Everybody's gonna watch this show. And then boom, guess what happened? Pregnant. Watch me with my cute belly. And now I start second guessing myself. And not that this wasn't planned, because my husband and I had very much planned this child. Our older child, Nerisi, was 1. And we wanted the two of them to be close in age. So we were ecstatic that baby Ryan, our first son, only son because I'm not having any more, baby Ryan was coming in February of 2020. Now that date is important. I want you to remember that date. When is Ryan due? February 2020. But now I'm in my first trimester of pregnancy. And any woman here can relate. First trimester is terrible, isn't it? That's when you get all the morning sickness and the hormones are just going haywire. The hormones are all over the place. My emotions were all over the place. I was crying for no reason. Couldn't stop crying. And I was like, nah, I can't manage. I can't do this taking stock thing. It was a great idea, but it's gonna have to wait until next year or maybe the year after that, whenever I settle in with these kids. But then the second trimester kicked in. And I don't know what your experience has been, but for me, I was floating on air. I'm like, second trimester, who? Baby, where? All of a sudden, I have all this energy. And I'm bubbling. And I'm ready to go. And taking stock is back on. Yes! Ryan was kicking, and so was I. And the show is ready to go. And so I spent a lot of time. By the way, all this time I have my older child, Alexa, who was smelling herself at the time, stressing me out. I have Nerisi, toddler. I have my husband and the dog, two different people. My husband is not the dog. Bella is a very cute, adorable, well-behaved dog, and my husband is well-behaved too. So, and did I mention that I was also working full-time? So I was full-time at Nationwide News Network, where I was hosting the #1 radio talk show in the country, Nationwide This Morning, and I was also the business and finance editor at Nationwide, a job which I absolutely loved. So taking stock and what would eventually become Money Media were supposed to be a side hustle. It wasn't supposed to be the main thing. And I was totally okay with that. That was my plan. I was happy to do that. But that's not quite how it turned out in the end, as you can know, as you would experience from me being here with you today. So a lot was going on at the time. I had, the baby blues, and then I just decided, okay, I'm gonna go ahead with this show. And the first episode of Taking Stock premiered on YouTube on October 29, 2019. Now Ryan is due when? February 2020. I see you guys are paying attention. You have good memory. Taking Stock premieres October 2019. So let's count with me. How many months do I have before this baby is coming? November, December, January, February, right? 4 months. And I'm here trying to figure out how am I going to manage a newborn, a toddler, a teenager, a husband, a dog, a job, and another job. And my bright idea was, okay, I'm just gonna pre-record as many episodes as I can so that I can take off, some maternity leave and be home with the babies. And that's exactly what we did. We pre-recorded some shows, but then something happened. Does anybody have an idea what happened around this time? Late 2019, this is before COVID. Before Ryan, in the economy. What was happening on the stock market? Anybody have a guess? Major development. It was I heard it, Trans-Jamaican Highway IPO. It was the biggest thing. So the government of Jamaica decided that they are going to sell the national highway to the people of Jamaica via an IPO, and it was the biggest IPO in Jamaica's history, $5 billion. They were going all out on the PR. And this was a massive opportunity for my brand new company because now all the people of Jamaica want to know, what is an IPO? And should I put my money in the stock exchange? Should I invest in these Trans-Jamaican Highway shares? And this IPO was due to launch in February 2020. And I said, well, I cannot miss this opportunity. But of course, Ryan is due. So I am 9 months pregnant, belly ready for bus, but I need to get on this IPO business, this Trans-Jamaican Highway business. So what do? I took my laptop to the hospital when I was giving birth to my son. Now, throughout all of this, my husband Richie is giving me the side eye. He even hid my laptop from me. But I secretly found it and put it back in the hospital bag. I don't know if he knows that, Richie. And I was able to do my work because, this wasn't my first kid. This is my third picnic, right? So I already kind of knew what to expect. And I also had a history of popping them out pretty easy. The last one, Nerisi, she born herself. I didn't even push. Serious, I didn't know that was possible. I just felt this massive contraction and my body opened up and there she was. She did all the work, not me. And then also, they say newborns sleep a lot. Newborns sleep up to 16 hours a day. So I'm like, okay, Ryan is gonna sleep and he'll be in the nursery most of the time. And so in those 24 to 48 hours after birth, I will have time to work on my show. That was my thinking. It sounds insane now, but that was my train of thought at the time. Unfortunately, everything went according to plan. And, no complications during childbirth, praise be to the Lord. And Ryan slept like a baby, as they say, newborn sleep. He slept. I got my work done. I interviewed, by the way, Nigel Clark on the 7th of February, 2020, about the Trans-Jamaican Highway IPO. Ryan was born on Sunday, the 9th of February, 2020, and the show premiered on schedule on Monday, the 10th of February, 2020. Right? Clap for that. So all of this happened in a very, very rapid space of time. And then, after the baby was born and the episode premiered, we went to our pre-recorded content, which was the plan, and everything was going well until coming to COVID too, but not even that yet. It's time for me to go back to work. Maternity leave done. And now I have, I have a full-time job in the middle of all of this. Time for me to go back to work. And now, Richie, who had previously only done passive sabotage, like hiding my laptop, now he decides that he's gonna speak up. And he's like, babe, you're doing too much. You can't manage all of this. You're not present with the children, you're on your phone all the time, you're working too much. And I don't remember what exactly I said to him in that moment, but I do remember what I thought. In my mind, I was like, you don't know what it's like. You're not an entrepreneur. You don't have thousands of people counting on you. You don't have sponsors who have paid for your content months in advance. You just don't get it. Now, let me tell you something. Richie's a surgeon. His job is literally life and death. And I'm here thinking he doesn't understand the high pressure and the high stakes, but he does. And so after I calmed down a little bit, took some time to breathe and think to myself, okay, listen, you can hardly accuse this man of not being supportive, because this is the man who is up with you at midnight, setting up cameras and lights in the living room when the babies are sleeping. This is the man who bought your first camera and who has invested time and money in your business and who to this day still watches every single one of my videos. So he's supportive. And I need to listen. But then at the same time, what did some of you point out earlier? What was happening? COVID. So Trans-Jamaican Highway IPO opened February 2020 and listed March 2020. And I don't remember if it was before or after they closed the borders and COVID-19 hit, but it was right around the same time, quite possibly within the same week of each other. And now all of these people who had just invested for the very first time in their lives, some of whom put their life savings into this thing, had lost a whole heap of money in very short time. The stock market fell 30% in a matter of days. And now they're all panicking. And they want their money back, but their share price is not what they paid for it. And they lost money. And many of them also lost their jobs. What do? And they're looking to me to provide answers. And so I feel this moral obligation to be there for the people of Jamaica during this difficult time, because this is for the greater good. This is not about me anymore, and it's not even about my family, but my family also needs me too. I have these tiny children at home. So how do I reconcile the two? How do I make this work for the greater good and for my family? And in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through the ABCs of how I got through this extremely difficult time. So A is for accountability. The first thing I had to do was take accountability for my actions. If my life was not in balance, whose fault was that? It's my fault. Ultimately, I have the control. I can make the decisions about what I choose to do. It's not my boss's fault for wanting his story for the 5 o'clock news. It's not my sponsor's fault. It's not the audience's fault. It definitely is not the baby's fault for wanting to be fed. It's my fault. I'm in charge of the priorities that I give in my life and that I allocate my resources to and my time to. So step one, I had to take accountability. Now, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to be sharing a worksheet with you, and I want you to ask yourself the first question on the worksheet: what will I take accountability for? Think about it. What are you willing to take accountability for in your life right now? B is for boundaries. I had to set some really strict boundaries, and my husband enforced them in my life, between my work and my life. Because the way my life looked at that point was, remember I was working morning show. Morning radio means I have to be up at 4 a.m. to be at work for 5, to be on air for 6. So I would come home around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would go straight into mommy mode. And now I have to change Pampers and feed and, all the things. Nap time, playtime, story time. And luckily, we had a pretty good evening routine with our kids that they follow to this day. 6 o'clock is supper time, 6:30 bath time, 7 o'clock story time. By 7:30, they're asleep. And my kids are pretty good sleepers. And then 7:30, that gives me until about 10-ish to work on taking stock and money media. Where's Richie in all of this, right? Beside me in the bed while I'm on my laptop and he's on Netflix. Eventually, so my boundary at the time was that when I come home and I'm in mommy mode, I'm in mommy mode. I'm not trying to use my phone or my laptop with one hand, like you saw in that first picture, and tend to the kids with the other hand. That was the boundary. Eventually, after I left my 9 to 5, quote unquote, 5 to 3, 5 to 2, I was able to set an even stricter boundary: no work in bed, no laptop in bed, and that also meant no phones in the bed, because when your job is social media, checking Instagram is work, right? And like I said, I had the enforcer who came down on that one. So what boundaries will you set in your lives? What are the boundaries that you're going to enforce at home, and what boundaries will you enforce at work? C is for compromise. Because even though we have our boundaries, sometimes things happen. If I have a client who's calling me outside of office hours, and it's a very important subject, I'm going to answer the phone. But the point is to make those situations the exception rather than the norm. Can't happen all the time. So what are you willing to compromise on, and what are you not willing to compromise on? And for me, that was my kids' bedtime. Story time and bedtime is sacred. Nobody can call me. I don't even keep the phone in the room with me at that hour. I'm not taking meetings. I try not to take events, unless you want to pay me $1 million, then I'll do it at 6 o'clock. But hey, try not to take events, don't take meetings, don't take phone calls during that time. So what are you willing to compromise on and not compromise on? D is for delegation. Because guess what? You cannot do it all yourself. And I had to realize that I can't do it all by myself. I need help. And so I hired an executive assistant part-time, and I hired some freelance writers, and they were helping me to write and research my scripts. And we also hired help at home. Finally got a helper. And so that is how we started delegating. But here's the thing too. Here's what happened. So anybody in here an entrepreneur? Ever hired anybody? When you first hire somebody, right? You expect them to do everything that you do and to the same quality that you do it. So I had to realize I couldn't expect my brand new hires to dedicate 16 hours a day to taking stock. That was unreasonable. And I also couldn't expect them to do the same quality of work that I do, because the skills that I have, I had acquired over many, many years. And so I had to invest the time to train them. And I also had to accept that what they were producing is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but that's fine. I have to be okay with that, and I have to trust them to do the job that I am paying them to do. And then finally, E is for exit. In September of 2020, I caught COVID. And I remember it so well, because Ryan was creeping, and Nerissa, the toddler, came to me, baby Gina as we call her, she spoke very early, and she said, "Mommy, Ryan doo-doo." And I'm like, "I don't smell anything." She's like, "No, I smell it, Ryan doo-doo." So I went and I checked and I sniffed, opened up the Pampers. I'm like, "Oh, he really did poop. But I don't smell anything, that's weird." Anybody had that symptom of COVID where you couldn't smell? So weird, right? And so that was my first clue that I had COVID. Richie took the kids to his parents, and of course I had to take sick leave from work, because by that time people were freaking out about COVID. If anybody have COVID, it's a big deal. It even made news. Somebody reported, like I saw an article saying Kalilah Reynolds has COVID, literally. And what happens now? Because I had no other symptoms. I wasn't sick, I just couldn't smell anything. So I'm at home alone for 3 weeks with no kids and no job to go to. What am I gonna do with all of this time? Now, you guys know me well by now. What do you think I did? I worked. I worked. I would wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, grab the laptop from the side table and start working until my body would say, "You should probably eat something. And you should probably bathe." And then I might take a little break and come back to work until I fell asleep. And I did that nonstop for 3 weeks. And I got so much done. Developed a business plan, applied for grants. I did all kind of stuff, new graphics, new templates. I got a whole lot done. And by the time the 3 weeks are done, I decided I don't want to go back to work, to my 9 to 5. My head is not there. My heart is not there. And clearly, there's more than enough work to do on my own here. And by that time, I was making enough money to replace my income. So I typed up my resignation letter and said goodbye, NNN, and never looked back. October 2020. So what are you willing to give up completely? What are the things that are no longer serving you? Think about it. So at that time, my priorities were my family and my new business. The job was way down on the list. And so I had to give up my job as part of achieving work-life balance. Superwoman doesn't exist. This person on the screen is a myth. So many of us, we've been told, Superman either. They're from Krypton. It's not even a real place, right? Many of us, especially as women, we are told that we can do it all, and we can have it all, and we can be it all. We can be the working mom, we can be the career mom, we can be in our kids' lives, and do work, and do all the million other things, and our house is gonna be clean, and we cook every day. It's impossible. It's literally, physically impossible. There are not enough hours in a day to do it all. So what do? We don't do it all because we don't have to. Even though we've been conditioned to believe that we need to do it all and our house must always be clean, and even though my mom judges me when she comes to my house sometimes, I don't care, because guess what? Spending quality time with my kids is more important than cleaning up after them every single minute. That is what is important. And so when you are deciding in your lives what is important to you and how do you achieve work-life balance, I want you to go back through the ABCs. Say them with me. Accountability, boundaries, compromise, delegation, and exit.
Your story is awesome, by the way. I was caught up in all the details and things, so thank you for that. And big up yourself, supermom. You said the woman was super, but you told a very super story, so glad for that. But all right, so I hear all of what you said, and your particular story. You play a lot of roles, you have kids, you have a husband. But for some people like myself, I'm a rich auntie vibe, and there are no children in my house, and there's no man in my house, and you know, I still am very busy and I have a whole heap of things going on. So what I really struggle with is even when I am not working, I find something to do. So what I really need some help with is to control myself and learn how to stop and be still. Do you have any advice for that?
Is it something that you enjoy doing?
Well, all right, so what happens is, well, you know I have a foundation, right?
Right.
So that's one of the things. And then I have a full-time job. And if I say, all right, I'm going to take a few days off, I spend those days planning something else. I don't stop. So I need to learn how to
Right.
stop.
I've been there. I remember when I used to look forward to holidays so I could work.
Yes! And I bring my laptop with me and I sit down.
I'm like, ooh, Independence weekends, a 4-day weekend. Oh, I can work, I can get all of this stuff done. I remember when I used to do that. It really is about you taking the time for yourself. I find what helps me is music, because it happens to me at night too, when I'm trying to sleep, and the thoughts just I'm having ideas, and I can't sleep because I'm just having all of these ideas. And usually what I would do when that happens to me is I think about sex. Think about it, think if he's there. So anyway, or plan B is music. I play some music and I start listening to it and singing it, like humming it under my breath, and that usually tends to lull me to sleep. But that usually works for me. You can give it a try.
Hi, good afternoon. Quick question. A lot of times when we think about balance, we think about how we need to do less. So work-life balance, we think about how we need to do less to achieve that balance. But I know in the room there are also people, maybe they're not all like me, but we're looking into how we can easily diversify our portfolios, build wealth by starting something else. So sometimes there is space to actually do more to reach the balance. But do you have any insights into how you can objectively measure if you should be doing more, if you actually have that space to do more, or if you're on the side where you actually need to be doing less, because you might have some really good ideas. These things are things that you really think you need to do, but if you were to evaluate, you really can't. There's no space on the plate. Or you may have some really good ideas, you really need to do them, and you do have the space to accommodate it. How do you make that judgment?
Well, when somebody who loves you puts you in check, it's a pretty good clue that maybe you need to scale it back a little. But at the same time, one of the things that you can do is just to write down the list and see what are the things objectively that I am doing, how am I spending my time, how am I allocating my time. I find a time audit to be a very useful tool to just take a day, probably even a week, and just write down hour by hour, how are you using your time? And if it is that you're wasting a lot of time, then sure, you have room to do more. But if it is that every single hour is packed with something, you are heading towards burnout. And you might not want to add another thing to that list.